Hello, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And today, it's Tuesday, June the 10th of 2025. Thanks for all the great response to my reading of Kreig's book, Presidential Puppetry, yesterday. I thought, well, let's continue with the story. So I'm going to pick up on page 9 of the book and pick up because I understand there was a little glitch at the end of the show yesterday. I don't know what happened, but we are going to just pick up right where it stopped and keep going from there. Thanks for being with me, and welcome again to McDuff Lives. Romney's Bain Capital colleagues early on included Robert Gay, a Mormon. Gay would become managing director of Bain from 1989 to 2004 and a Mormon general authority. The title is one of the church's highest-ranking offices, with roots extending back to the 1830s in a largely secret decision-making process launched by Joseph Smith. In recent years, after moving on from Bain, Gay has also been managing director of Huntsman Gay Global Capital, a billion-dollar financial firm. Gay was the son of William Bill Gay, the former CEO and president of Summa Corporation, SUMMA. Summa was an umbrella group for the holdings of the secretive Hughes. Of course, talking of Howard Hughes, one of the world's wealthiest, most glamorous, and otherwise successful men. Hughes built great companies, designed innovative airplanes and films, betted movie stars, bested the mafia, bribed presidents, and served as the front man for a secret $250 million CIA project in 1970 to salvage a sunken Soviet nuclear submarine. I want to know more about that. Bill Gay led what became known in business circles as the Mormon Mafia that ran the Hughes empire during the tycoon's last years. The obsessive and drug-deranged Hughes lived in seclusion on the 9th floor of the Desert Inn, the famed Las Vegas casino. Prominent recent Hughes biographers allege that Bill Gay systematically abused his boss's trust by fostering Hughes's drug use so that Gay and other top executives could loot his holdings after Hughes discarded his previous chief. Their allegation is not a passing reference. The biographers say Gay conspired with his brother-in-law, a physician of the Mormon faith, for Hughes to receive massive, unnecessary daily drug doses for 2 years. They allege that Hughes was killed by this treatment and that $1 billion in his assets disappeared in mysterious circumstances. The conventional media almost totally neglected these suspicions about Bill Gay in 2012 campaign coverage. For example, the most definitive biography of Romney is The Real Romney, a 400-page book in 2012 by 2 Boston Globe political reporters, Michael Kranish and Scott Hellman. The book, like nearly all campaign coverage, fails to mention Bill Gay, Howard Hughes, or Robert Gay's extraordinarily high rank in the Mormon Church. Instead, the book's focus on the Mitt Romney-Robert Gay relationship is based on what is portrayed as a heartwarming tale. This was how Romney closed down Bain Capital temporarily in Boston to deploy all personnel in a search throughout the New York metro region for Gay's missing daughter. As it turned out, she had embarked on a long weekend at a rave concert. The story serves to humanize Romney as a caring executive. On reflection, however, his professional and charitable acts raise a question entirely omitted in the book of how much he would extend himself for those not within the inner circle of his church and business. For Mitt Romney, helping Robert Gay was more like helping a brother than an act of true charity. To be clear, I have no evidence that any of the purportedly looted Hughes money found its way into Bain or Romney coffers. Yet, Even a one-step removed association of Bain with such an exceptional business leader as Hughes adds a new dimension of sophistication and intrigue to the Bain-Romney saga. It is difficult to imagine that, at the minimum, the younger Gay did not learn useful business strategies from his father and from the Hughes track record of vision and success via astute investments. In his day, Hughes was like Warren Buffett, Charles Lindbergh, and Cary Grant, his fellow Playboy pal and friend for 4 decades, all combined into one person. Timid or unimaginative news coverage deprived readers and voters from learning about any of that during the 2012 campaign. Even a mini bio, as here, of Mitt Romney during the 1970s should touch on his personal life as a bishop in his church, and also on the rapid growth of the LDS Church in the United States in terms of worshipers and overall influence. The church's growth during that period is charted in many places, including by the book America's Saints: The Rise of Mormon Power. President Nixon's appointment of George Romney to the cabinet as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development helped raise the profile of the church within Washington. So did the ascendancy within the intelligence community. By the way, when you speak of Washington, if anybody's ever driven on the Washington Beltway going west in the northern part of it, you will come around a curve and suddenly you will see the great Mormon temple with the angel Gabriel blowing his horn in gold on top of the temple. And, for people that had driven that Beltway their whole lives and then hadn't for a few years, I guess when I was away at college is when they built it. And suddenly, wow, that really stands out as you're going around that corner. It looks like something attached, something, I don't know, religious, but big. All right, so did the ascendancy within the intelligence community of LDS member Brent Scowcroft, National Security Advisor to President Ford and the first President Bush. Scowcroft had been a protege of the Rockefeller family and one of its leading Washington representatives, Henry Kissinger. The CIA and FBI began heavily recruiting LDS members during this period because of their clean-cut image, work ethic, and language skills acquired during the missionary work. The church's famed genealogy database is a unique trove of historical information on the nation's families. Also, the National Security Agency's $2 billion data center at Bluffdale, Utah, scheduled for completion in 2013, is part of the Big Brother surveillance controversy that erupted mid-year. James Bamford, the leading historian of the NSA, set the scene this way in early 2012. Okay, this is quoting James Bamford. Today, Bluffdale is home to one of the nation's largest sects of polygamists, the Apostolic United Brethren, with upwards of 9,000 members. But new pioneers have quietly begun moving into the area, secretive outsiders who say little and keep to themselves. Like the pious polygamists, they are focused on deciphering cryptic messages that only they have the power to understand. Rather than Bibles, prophets, and worshipers, this temple will be filled with servers, computer intelligence experts, and armed guards. And instead of listening for words flowing down from heaven, these newcomers will be secretly capturing, storing, and analyzing vast quantities of words and images hurtling through the world's telecommunications networks. In the little town of Bluffdale, Big Love and Big Brother have become uneasy neighbors. Unquote. Wow. Now that's some writing, isn't it? James Bamford. Yeah, his history of the NSA is the famous textbook one. There's a lot more has come out since that book. Readers of conventional news reports during the campaign missed not simply the story of Hughes, the gay family, Mormons, and their common involvement in the gambling industry. Almost always missing was the context of why the gaming sector threatens to corrupt public officials. Gambling poses unique dangers. It is a volatile, high volume cash business that is heavily regulated and has a history of mob control. As a result, the industry has a long history of elaborate money laundering and tax avoidance schemes. 6 decades ago, beneficiaries of money laundering services included major Mexican narcotics dealers, as well as the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, and the CIA, according to the experienced reporters Sally Denton and Roger Morris. The motives for government involvement are too varied to list. For current purposes, however, the spirit can be summed up in the goodwill gesture made famous in Casablanca. Your winnings, sir. In sum, the casino industry has a long history that did not end with Bugsy Siegel or Howard Hughes, no matter how family-friendly they make the tourist shows. Getting rich at Bain. The standard story is that Romney, a brilliant Harvard MBA with great instincts, and his colleagues all became rich because their talents identified spectacular successes among their approximately 100 deals during Romney's years leading Bain Capital. The pro-Romney tilt is that his successors, including an early investor in Staples, the office supply company, show that he was a, quote, job creator. The fairer view is that the company's purpose was wealth creation for its owners, a goal that sometimes led Bain Capital to build companies and sometimes to gut them, including via complex financial transactions leading to bankruptcy, plant closures, and job losses. At other times, creating wealth meant investing in companies providing controversial services, such as offshoring jobs and disposing of medical waste that included aborted fetuses. An article on the fetal medical waste is important because it shows that Romney was signing documents and running a Bain-affiliated company well after February 1999, when he and his 2012 campaign claimed he left the firm. First steps in politics. Romney became wealthy as CEO of Bain Capital and politically prominent as an unsuccessful 1994 Senate rival to Ted Kennedy. Romney is widely credited with rescuing the 2002 Winter Olympics at Salt Lake City by stepping in as CEO with the backing of important Mormon leaders such as Utah Governor Michael Leavitt. In 2002, Romney spent $6.3 million of his own money in a successful campaign as a reform-minded, pro-business, pro-choice, pro-gay rights GOP gubernatorial candidate in Massachusetts. His proudest accomplishment at the time was a universal health care law that would serve as the model for the Obamacare law that he now opposes. Pardon me a moment. Oh, where's my tea? First steps in politics. Romney became wealthy as CEO of Bain Capital and politically prominent as an unsuccessful 1994 Senate rival to Ted Kennedy. All right, sorry I read that. Romney spent $6.3 million of his own money in a successful campaign as a reform-minded, pro-business, pro-choice, pro-gay rights GOP gubernatorial candidate in Massachusetts. All right. Romney's reversals in policy positions won him the nickname Mr. Etch-a-Sketch. His changes have perplexed voters. He now opposes his previous positions on the social safety net, women's choice, and gay rights. He says his views have evolved. The question is, why? Conservatives fretted over his changes as their central issue during his GOP presidential primary campaigns in 2007 and 2011 to 2012. They asked whether Romney would revert back to his moderate positions if elected. Presidential Puppetry argues that, to the contrary, his previous positions were opportunistic choices made to advance his religion, career, and allies. He is operating on a level of history and destiny whereby these controversies are petty compared to his goal of winning office. A family friend of the Romneys told the New York Times that Mitt and Ann Romney decided he should run for president because they each, quote, felt it was what God wanted them to do. What does a divine mandate mean in practice? The VP choice. Late on the Friday evening of August 3rd, 2012, Romney announced Paul Ryan as his running mate. The choice confirmed that Romney's policies were cemented to a radical right agenda. The right had feared that Romney's moderate record in Massachusetts reflected closet liberal principles to which he would revert in a presidency. Instead, his Massachusetts record was simply an effort to do whatever was necessary in order to ascend in that time. Even before the 2012 primary contest, Romney formally endorsed the rights agenda at the Americans for Prosperity convention in Washington, D.C. Charles and David Koch, the two billionaires who control Koch Industries, fund the event. They control 84% of the nation's second largest privately owned company and each hold assets valued at $34 billion. Quote, I'm tempted to say that Mitt Romney has found his inner Paul Ryan, unquote, wrote Jennifer Rubin, a neoconservative blogger for the Washington Post. Quote, in today's speech before Americans for Prosperity and in the accompanying documentation he lays out, it is fair to say he's done something extraordinarily out of character. He's gone bold. The spending and entitlement plan Romney presents embodies a great many of the ideas that Ryan, chairman of the House Budget Committee, has laid out in his original Roadmap for America's Future on Social Security and in his 2012 budget, unquote. Thus, the far right has nothing to fear about Romney being an Etch-a-Sketch candidate. Romney's selection of Ryan confirmed that the head of the ticket would not deviate from the hard right path. This would please the Koch brothers, who were among the leading oligarchs seeking to defeat Obama. They made massive donations to advocacy organizations in hope of turning back the nation's social safety net and gutting regulation and taxes. New York Times columnist Paul Krugman, a Princeton professor and Nobel Prize winner in economics, wrote, quote, Mr. Ryan's true constituency is the commentariat, which years ago decided that he was the honest, serious conservative whose proposals deserve respect even if you don't like him. Longtime GOP consultant Roger Stone spoke more bluntly. He claimed to have evidence from a confidential source that during a meeting in July, David Koch offered Mitt Romney $100 million extra into the 2012 campaign funding if he would pick Ryan for the ticket. Stone is more likely than most to know such matters. That sum of $100 million is modest for the two brothers, each of whom is well into their 70s and facing the prospect of inheritance taxes. Their wealth comes in significant part from the Kansas-based company founded by their father, Fred Koch. Under a Koch-friendly Romney-Ryan government, the Koch dynasty would recoup a $100 million campaign investment many times over in savings on inheritance taxes and avoidance of regulation for an energy business with many regulatory battles. Although a $100 million payment might have been illegal if sent with conditions, the donation could hardly lead to court if a Romney-Ryan government failed to investigate the allegations. Moreover, why would an investigation occur? Any probe would be difficult under the murky new campaign rules following the Supreme Court's 2010 Koch-friendly decision in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission. The Paul Ryan Family Saga. In 1970, Paul Davis Ryan was born in Janesville in the southeast corner of Wisconsin. He is from a fifth-generation family dwelling in that region just north of Chicago, with part of the family running a construction business. In addition, he has a compelling personal story of achievement through adversity. He was just 16 when his lawyer father died, and so he relied on Social Security benefits for college. Quote, "It was a safety net that was there for us at a very important and difficult time in our lives," he recalled. "So to me, each generation has an obligation to make sure these promises, these covenants the government makes to us are guaranteed," unquote. He won an internship in Washington with GOP Senator Bob Caston, worked at Jack Kemp's Empower America Advocacy Center, and was a top staffer for the ultimate conservative Kansas Senator Sam Brownback, now governor. Like his mentors, Ryan's view is that privatizing Social Security is the best way to save it. An excellent campaigner, he won election in 1998 with 57% of the votes in a swing district encompassing his hometown. Voters have reelected him since, with margins well over 60%. Ryan has relied on government paychecks virtually his entire adult career. Thanks to his government jobs, Ryan draws on the excellent congressional health insurance plan and has a lavish pension plan awaiting him. He, Romney, and their backers draw the line, however, in policies helping those outside their partisan, religious, business, and social circles. Pundits drew the battle lines in 2011 when Ryan led a Tea Party fostered GOP House majority into approving a budget that deeply cut spending. Ludicrous and cruel was liberal Paul Krugman's assessment. The conventional line of attack on Ryan's plan, responded Charles Krauthammer, is already taking shape. It cuts poverty programs and privatizes Medicare in order to cut taxes for the rich. Major demagoguery on all three counts. Well, I am going to skip the next page and a half and go to summing up this chapter so we can move on to chapter 2. But before I do, I need to grab a glass of water because I forgot to bring one with me. So I'll be right back. Thank you. There we go. Yeah. Oh, well, just got my tea. Thank you, Marcia. Summing up, the material above is a preface to more thorough portraits of Romney and Ryan later in the book. The candidates had many complexities that shaded their portraits. For example, part of the Mormon faith until 1978, including Romney's time as a missionary, was that blacks should not be permitted to participate fully in the church. Some argued that LDS theology decreed that black skin was a sign of diabolical ancestry. The following chapters will focus on the deceptions and scandals of Barack Obama, along with his predecessors in the White House and his current and recent colleagues in the federal government. By the end of that discussion, many readers might yearn for a more straightforward alternative. Should it have been Romney Ryan? This introduction provides the clues, as in any mystery. Isn't that funny? We always have buyer's remorse whenever we elect somebody. And I think there's a lot of that going around right now. Chapter 2, The President's Hidden History and Why It Matters. On the frigid morning of January 20th, 2009, I joined vast numbers in Washington, D.C. and across the nation in celebrating the inauguration of Barack Obama as president. As a matter of fact, I was there and in the crowd and celebrating with them. My front row view of Pennsylvania Avenue came from the condo balcony of my longtime friends and neighbors, Bill and Barbara Conklin. Their balcony overlooked the Navy Memorial on Pennsylvania Avenue, halfway between the Capitol, where the new president took the oath of office, and his destination, the White House. Years ago, Bill had designed the memorial, with a plaza and adjoining museum at the foot of our building at the center of the city's oldest section of downtown. Bill was an architect, age 85, with a crew cut that suggested his military background. He and his former college sweetheart, Barbara, invited me to speak informally to a visiting student group from their alma mater, Doane College, Doane, located in Crete, Nebraska. I was thrilled to do so, especially on that historic day. For me, as for millions of others, the day was a celebration of a fresh start for the country after the nation's horrid hardships in the months and years previous. With history happening all around on that bitterly cold day, I was gratified to join the warm hospitality of the Conklins. We needed only to step from their 10th floor condo to their balcony to observe both the memorial and a grand vista of the parade route. The National Archives houses the nation's most treasured documents just across the avenue. Next to the archives is the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Justice. On our side of the street, the Navy Memorial adjoins the former site of Signature's Restaurant, owned by the notorious Republican lobbyist Jack Abramoff. By then, Abramoff was imprisoned for his briberies, which symbolized what many thought were bad old days of Washington's secrecy, duplicity, and insider corruption. To see an era of hope and change unfold before my eyes made me as happy as anyone could be. Yes, the whole crowd was happy. It was like just this celebration of happiness and relief that finally he's gone. Well, not quite anyone. "He's getting out," shouted Bill Conklin, excitedly pointing at Pennsylvania Avenue. "He's doing it. I can't believe it. There's Michelle, too. She's doing it, too." Just as Bill said, the president had emerged from his black limousine right in front of us, halfway between 7th and 8th Streets. He began walking toward the White House. So did the new First Lady, clad in her dazzling canary yellow overcoat. I raised my Canon ELPH to record the moments, regretting I had not brought a camera with a long-distance lens. Yet I had had no reason to imagine in advance that the personal photos of such a widely photographed occasion would have any unique value. My photo shows the Justice Department at top right and the archives at the column structure. The first couple is just to the right of the Navy Memorial flagpole at center. Well, I won't try to share this photo with you because it's black and white and not very, very easy to see. Why was Bill Conklin so excited? He was used to working with famous people, including Nelson Rockefeller. Bill had designed the memorial as part of a long, distinguished career. His work had included a prominent role in the redevelopment of the entire Pennsylvania Quarter, thereby fulfilling a legacy request that Jacqueline Kennedy had made upon her husband's death to their friend Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the New York senator. To fulfill his promise to JFK's widow, Moynihan fought hard for these projects as chair of the Senate Finance Committee and was a fixture himself with his wife Elizabeth in their penthouse suite overlooking the Naval Memorial. "Let me show you something," Bill told me just after the president's motorcade passed from view and the first couple re-entered their limo. Bill took me to his study and quickly found a copy of a letter he had written in November 2008 to the Obama transition team. In it, he suggested that the new president could show his respect for the nation's veterans if he stepped out of his limo at that spot during his parade. Bill wrote that the Obama team that such a gesture would be doubly significant because the president, as a former constitutional law instructor at the University of Chicago, would also demonstrate his respect for the nation's founding documents, housed at the National Archives. I proceeded to write a blog that described the incident as well as the history of the neighborhood. I then made my first ever submission to the Huffington Post in the hope that someone would like it enough to publish. That evening, I attended one of the nearby inaugural balls 6 blocks from me at Washington Convention Center. Early the next day, the Huffington Post front paged my column. The scoop facilitated my return to journalism, my first career after college before I became a DC based lawyer and trade association leader. After the Obama column, I undertook a number of investigative reports published by the Huffington Post. The reports led to my deeper inquiries on Washington corruption and cover ups, which provide the foundation for this book. Investigative reporter Wayne Madsen provided me the first clue. A friend of mine from the National Press Club in Washington, Madsen invited me to visit the archives with him so he could show me procedures for inspecting sensitive documents. He's a political affairs commentator and author who blogs at the Wayne Madsen Report, whose major scoops are embargoed behind a paywall. Madsen spent 14 years in the U.S. Navy. 10 years of it was as an intelligence officer, including a year detailed to the National Security Agency as an analyst. And I'm happy to say I had the privilege of interviewing Wayne Madsen in 2019, and you can find that interview on my McDuff Archives channel at Rumble. Upon arrival at the archives, Wayne instructed me on how to retrieve declassified documents. Then he started on his search for materials related to the Obama life story. While he worked on that, I tried out the system by looking up Colonel J.C. King. My late mother, Margaret Kreig, had mentioned King to me as her primary CIA liaison when she was a globe-trotting author-editor in the 1960s, who occasionally briefed the agency secretly on her observations. Yes, Andy's mother was working, I guess, as a consultant, perhaps, for the CIA, occasionally. One of her books was a first-person account of jungle exploration with Harvard researchers entitled Green Medicine: The Search for the Plants That Heal. The book became an international bestseller, reporting the first experiments with LSD and revealing the promise of folk remedies used by unschooled practitioners in rural regions. Her other major book was Black Market Medicine, which drew on her exclusive access to federal records, revealing how the mafia and other crime syndicates endangered consumers by marketing counterfeited prescription drugs, including ones intended for life-saving purposes. So I punched in the name of Colonel King. I saw declassified correspondence regarding his post as the longtime CIA leader of covert intelligence for the Western Hemisphere. The documents indicated that King had been involved in sensitive matters with the highest levels of intrigue and diplomacy, such as his work with CIA Director Allen Dulles to determine U.S. options following Fidel Castro's rise to power in Cuba. My later research turned up few references to King in published work. That's understandable given King's role as a leader of covert operations. Colonel King was not even his real name. It states that Joseph Caldwell King was the chief of the Western Hemisphere Division of the CIA and at times used the CIA code name of Colonel J.C. King. A West Point graduate, he had been a vice president of a major pharmaceutical company early in his career, and then worked closely with the Rockefeller family and its interests before his government career. After his official retirement with the CIA, he became CEO of a CIA front company called the Amazon Natural Drug Company. All this is to confirm my mother's contemporary recollections revealed here publicly for the first time. So I just have to make a footnote and say, wow, Andy's mother was working for this J.C. King, who is a former pharmaceutical company vice president, looking for herbs and plants that are going to help people, right? Okay. Well, I'm sure that she believes that, but then Alan Dulles ends up with hundreds of plant-based drugs that will not make you healthy at all. Matter of fact, might even kill you. While I was researching Colonel King at the archives, Wayne was at the computer next to mine researching the Obama family. Wayne looked up Business International Corporation, BIC, a New York-based research company that was Barack Obama's first employer after his 1983 graduation with a bachelor's degree from Columbia University. The CIA archives revealed that a New York Times article published in 1977, quoting the son of the owner of BIC as stating that the organization was a CIA front company. The headline was, quote, CIA established many links to journalists at home and abroad, unquote. The article by John Crutzen and Joseph Treaster drew on 1970s public concern about CIA excesses and documented extensive ties between journalists and the agency. Here's an example from the news article, quote, the agency's long-standing relationship with American journalists was first called to public attention in 1973 when William E. Colby, then director of Central Intelligence, provided reporters in Washington with some of the details on a background basis. The organizations, which range from some of the most influential in the nation to some of the most obscure, include ABC and CBS News, Time, Life, and Newsweek magazines, the New York Times, the New York Herald Tribune, the Associated Press, and the United Press International. Another who acknowledged a connection was Elliot Haynes, Haynes, sorry. He and his father, Eldridge Haynes, co-founded Business International, a widely respected business information service. The newspaper quoted the younger Haynes as saying his father had provided cover for 4 CIA employees in various countries between 1955 and 1960. Later in this book, we shall explore the implications of this article. Whatever the facts, the most striking aspect is how few in the media or anywhere else even dare to ask questions publicly about Obama's former employer and other biographical information suggesting national intelligence ties to him and other U.S. political leaders. The reason undoubtedly relates to the extraordinary deference the major news organizations provide to the CIA. The 1977 New York Times story, for example, was a follow-up to a breakthrough 25,000-word article by Carl Bernstein for Rolling Stone. Bernstein and his editors entitled their opus, quote, The CIA and the Media, How America's Most Powerful News Media Worked Hand in Glove with the Central Intelligence Agency and Why the Church Committee Covered It Up, unquote. The Bernstein article drew from a Senate investigation of CIA transgressions led in 1975 by Senate Democrat Frank Church. Undoubtedly, the Times saw the Bernstein article and such underlying relationships as the CIA's secret media liaison Operation Mockingbird program as an implied challenge to the major media's tradition of deference to the agency. Little has changed. We shall see that the topic of CIA infiltration of the media, politics, and other segments of civic life remains of limited interest for subsequent generations of high-ranking assignment editors and their publishers. Until this book, I have not reported what I saw at the archives and my later research on this topic. It was Wayne's scoop. He published it in February 2009 on the Wayne Madsen Report under the headline, Barack Obama's Postgraduate CIA Employment. I knew also that he hoped one day to write a book about it, which he did in 2012 under the title, The Manufacturing of a President. Furthermore, I was focused on my research regarding injustices in domestic law enforcement facilitated by Karl Rove, among others. When I began it, I erroneously regarded these injustices as distinct from the BIC, the CIA, or the Obama life story. I now see many interrelationships described later in the book. I strongly suspect, for example, that the Obama administration has protected Rove from serious investigation because he provides ongoing utility, not simply to the intelligence community, but to powerful outside patrons who command respect from office holders at the highest levels of both parties. Protection of Rove and his Confederates has inevitably allowed continued suffering in prison of victims of their abusive prosecution tactics. With that background, let's look at Madsen's first column, which reported in February 2009, quote, "For 1 year, Obama worked as a researcher in BIC's Financial Services Division, where he wrote for 2 BIC publications, Financing Foreign Operations and Business International Money Report, a weekly newsletter." An informed source has told Wayne Madsen reports that Obama's tuition debt at Columbia was paid off by BIC. In addition, Wayne Madsen reports has learned that a decade after Obama lived in Indonesia with his mother and his adoptive father, Lolo Sotoro, the 20-year-old Obama, who was known as Barry Sotoro, traveled to Pakistan in 1981 and was hosted by the family of Muhammad Sumro, a Pakistani Sindhi who became acting president of Pakistan after the resignation of General Pervez Musharraf on August 18, 2008. WMR was told that the Obama-Sotoro trip to Pakistan ostensibly to go partridge hunting with the Somros, related to unknown CIA business. Does this really suggest that the future president has a suspicious relationship with the CIA or those involved in front activities? There is reason to be skeptical, as I suggested to Wayne. First, just because the company has served as a front in the 1950s does not mean that it was still involved 2 decades later, or that the young Obama might know anything about it. Second, why would the mainstream news media not have pursued the matter if there were anything significant to be found? The New York Times article is readily available for anyone. Most important for me at the time, I was hot on the trail of reporting then fresh abuses arising from the Bush administration's political purge of U.S. attorneys in 2006. In the time since then, I have researched other deceptions or omissions in President Obama's autobiography. More important, I've analyzed how they relate to his government decision-making. The president's true history clarifies his decision-making on jobs, the economy, national security, war, health, justice, and the environment. The story that follows provides new understanding of Obama's 2012 re-election victory and his likely decision-making in his second term. In this chapter, I summarize some of the people, locales, and topics that fill later pages. At the outset, I introduce myself as your tour guide. Soon, however, I will fade to the background, and the story will tell itself. Next, we will explore how President Obama ascended so far so quickly. The research will show that most of our leaders have many attractive qualities. These usually include innate ability, charm, intelligence, and hard work. Readers here will not see one-dimensional attacks. I was reminded of this the evening of June 28, 2012, in observing Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas meet members of the Yale Law School Alumni Association at its annual dinner just a few hours after the court rendered its decision on the controversy over the Affordable Health Care Act, also known as Obamacare. Although the substance of his comments was off the record, I can share that he was gracious in private greetings with all who approached, eloquent in his remarks, and very well received, with 2 standing ovations by virtually all attendees, including me, in recognition of a fine message suitable for the occasion. Nonetheless, we explore in these pages suspicions that too many of our leaders have dangerous tendencies, even if they are impressive most of the time. This book raises questions and provides evidence, much of it in the same sequence I researched it. I challenge readers to walk in my shoes, making a personal judgment at each step as to what questions seem worth pursuing. This review provides a fuller history of both our heroes and villains. Along the way, we encounter courageous and often colorful men and women. Some have outsized personalities. Madsen, for example, is a freelancer who risked his life to travel to Rwanda to write a book about genocide. Another unique spirit energizing this book is Dana Jill Simpson, an Alabama lawyer from a rural town who for years worked with Karl Rove and others of stature on high-level Republican intrigues. In 2007, Simpson embarked on an often dangerous and nearly always frustrating crusade to find justice for victims of political oppression on matters that span the country. Throughout this book, we shall see such civic heroes battling officials who are leading the country to ruin, sometimes by intention. The corruption and class war hurt the economy, jobs, healthcare, education, the financial sector, technological advances, and civic institutions. The book will show schemes to steal national elections by large-scale tampering with election machines. We shall examine frightening attacks on privacy, economic security, the moral basis of American foreign policy, and the rule of law. We raise questions about conventional accounts of history, of changing crimes, history changing crimes against the public, such as, most importantly, we raise questions about conventional accounts of history changing crimes. Most importantly, we shall begin to see by the end of the book why our leaders dare not lead and why their misconduct must be exposed. Well, I'm going to stop here. The next chapter is chapter 3, Hidden Evidence in Plain Sight. On May 9th, 2011, New York Times reporter Janie Scott lectured 5 blocks from the White House about her then new biography, A Singular Woman, The Untold Story of Barack Obama's Mother. Well, Stanley Ann Dunham, the subject of our next reading from Presidential Puppetry by Andrew Kreig. Thanks for being with me today, and I will see you Thursday morning. As you know, I take Wednesdays off to take care of the vicissitudes and necessities and trips to the store and things like that. Thanks very much. I will see you then. Bye-bye.